The ships did not burn. There was no heroic wall of flame along the coast of Veracruz, no smiling commander watching 11 vessels turn to ash. The truth was quieter and more calculating. Rigging came down. Useful materials were removed. Hulls were disabled, dismantled, or sunk until most of the fleet could no longer carry dissidents back to Cuba. Men who had crossed the Gulf as sailors suddenly became soldiers in an invasion none of them fully understood. Hernán Cortés did not need a match. He needed control. By late summer 1519, he had defied the governor who appointed him, created a town council that appointed him again under a different authority, suppressed resistance within his own company, and eliminated the easiest route of escape. Behind him lay political ruin if his legal gamble failed. Ahead lay a world of powerful indigenous states, rival armies, unfamiliar languages, and wealth large enough to turn disobedience into royal favor. The command, "Burn the ships," survives because it makes the story simple. One leader, one irreversible decision. The real story is darker. Cortés constructed a legal fiction, converted a private expedition into rebellion, and used interpreters, alliances, violence, and reports to make it look like service to the king. And even that would not have been enough without the indigenous people, who chose to use him for purposes of their own. Cortés left Cuba in February 1519 with 11 vessels, roughly 500 European fighting men, sailors, artillery, and a small number of horses. Exact totals vary among the sources. The expedition did not sail directly from Spain, and Cortés was not simply an independent fugitive stealing a royal navy. Diego Velázquez, governor of Cuba, had helped authorize and organize the venture, then moved to remove Cortés before departure as distrust deepened. Cortés sailed anyway. His instructions did not give him an uncontested right to conquer a continental empire. Returning empty-handed could mean arrest, financial destruction, and prosecution. But saying an executioner's block definitely waited for him turns risk into invented certainty. Cortés still claimed loyalty to the Spanish crown. His problem was the authority between himself and the king, Velázquez. Before Cortés could challenge that authority, he needed to survive the coast. Near Tabasco, his forces fought a major battle against Maya-speaking inhabitants. After peace was negotiated, local leaders presented the Spaniards with food, valuables, and 20 enslaved women. One of them would become known by several names: Malintzin in Nahuatl, Marina after baptism, and later La Malinche. She was not delivered as a singular peace offering, selected because anyone already knew her historical importance. She was one enslaved woman among 20. The sources describing her early life were written later and do not permit a complete biography. A widely repeated account says she was born into a prominent Nahua-speaking family near the Gulf Coast and was sold after her father's death. Parts of that story may be true, but the details should not be presented as a verified childhood narrative. What mattered immediately was language. Malintzin spoke Nahuatl and a Maya language. Cortés had already recovered Jerónimo de Aguilar, a Spaniard who had survived years in the Maya world and learned a Maya language. At first, communication could move through a chain. Nahuatl to Maya through Malintzin, Maya to Spanish through Aguilar, and then back again. Every sentence crossed not one border, but several. This was not mechanical translation. Diplomatic speech carried rank, metaphor, courtesy, and threat, and Spanish terms did not arrive with perfect Nahuatl equivalents. Malintzin had to interpret meaning, not merely exchange words. She soon learned enough Spanish to become Cortés's principal interpreter. That image reveals the real imbalance of the expedition. Cortés possessed steel weapons, horses, guns, and legal documents. Malintzin possessed access to human meaning. The original script turns her into a secret strategist who taught Cortés to impersonate a god and interpreted Moctezuma's gold as an invitation. Those scenes are dramatic but unsupported. We do not possess a transcript in which she tells Cortés that more treasure means the empire wants to be conquered. Nor is there good evidence that Moctezuma accepted Cortés as the returning god Quetzalcoatl and became psychologically paralyzed. The returning god explanation grew powerful after the conquest because it made European victory appear preordained. Recent scholarship treats the identification with deep skepticism. Moctezuma's gifts can be understood as diplomacy, an attempt to assess, honor, manage, redirect, or contain dangerous strangers. Cortes's hunger for wealth required no indigenous prophecy. On the Gulf Coast, Cortes encountered another source of power: communities already navigating the reach of the Triple Alliance. At Zempoala, Totonac leaders complained about Mexica tribute demands. They did not passively beg a white liberator to save them. They saw a small foreign force with unusual weapons and tried to place it inside regional politics. Cortes saw the same opportunity from the opposite direction. When Mexica tribute collectors appeared, the encounter became a test. Cortes encouraged resistance, then secretly protected or released some of the same officials, allowing him to appear useful to both sides. This was not proof that he understood the whole empire after one conversation. It was improvisation. Create dependence, control information, and make each party uncertain about what he had promised the other. The Totonac alliance also destroys the legend of 500 Spaniards marching alone into an alien continent. Before the inland campaign properly began, indigenous warriors, guides, and porters were already part of the force. They carried supplies, moved artillery, interpreted terrain, and connected the newcomers to political networks Cortes could not see by himself. Then came Veracruz. Cortes and his supporters established the Villa-Rica de la Veracruz and formed a cabildo, or town council. The political maneuver was elegant. Cortes resigned the position he held under Velázquez. The new council, dominated by his allies, then appointed him Captain General and Chief Justice in the name of the king. By this logic, Cortes no longer answered to the governor of Cuba. He claimed to act directly for Charles V. The legality was self-serving and contested, but it gave the expedition a paper shield. Representatives and treasure could be sent towards Spain to argue that Cortes had discovered wealthy lands, gained willing allies, and served the crown despite disobeying Velázquez. Some members of the company did not accept the maneuver. A group associated with Velázquez attempted or discussed escape by ship. Cortes responded with punishment. Then he neutralized most of the remaining fleet. Later tradition supplied the fire. Accounts closer to the campaign describe ships run aground, sunk, or dismantled, with their condition and seaworthiness disputed. Cortes could claim that worms or damage had made them unsafe. His enemies could recognize deliberate destruction. Either way, the result was practical. Fewer sailors remained on the coast, more men became available for the inland march, and opponents lost an easy route to Cuba. But even this decision was not as irreversible as legend claims. The Gulf did not vanish. Spanish ships would return. In 1520, Panfilo de Narváez arrived from Cuba with a larger force sent to arrest Cortes. Cortes defeated him and absorbed many of his men. Later, the invaders built brigantines for the siege of Tenochtitlan. The conquest was not won because one moment on a beach permanently erased retreat. It survived through repeated access to maritime resources, reinforcements, indigenous labor, and new alliances. In August 1519, the inland march began. The landscape was not one endless tropical jungle. The expedition moved from hot coastal lowlands into cold highlands, across forests, valleys, cultivated land, and mountain passes. Europeans and coastal allies alike suffered from weather and altitude. Some Spaniards wore steel pieces. Many also adopted padded cotton armor. The first great political barrier was Tlaxcala. Tlaxcala was not a tribe waiting to be rescued. It was a confederated indigenous polity that had preserved its independence despite long conflict with the Triple Alliance. Its leaders had reasons to distrust Tenochtitlan, and equally strong reasons to kill armed strangers entering their territory. Tlaxcalan forces attacked. For days, fighting tested both sides. Spanish cavalry, steel, crossbows, firearms, and formations mattered, but so did Zempoalan support and indigenous logistics. Firearms were slow, limited, and far from magical. Horses created shock, but could be wounded. The Tlaxcalans were not mindless waves who did not fear death. They adjusted tactics, debated strategy, and forced the invaders into a crisis. Within Tlaxcala, leaders did not share one opinion. The younger commander, Xicotencatl, favored continued resistance. Older rulers and rival factions weighed the losses, the strangers' military value, and the possibility of turning them against Tenochtitlan. Peace emerged from political calculation, not from Malintzin delivering one perfect speech about freedom. Her role was nevertheless indispensable. Negotiations required language, protocol, repetition, clarification, and trust built under threat. She stood between men who had recently tried to kill one another and helped make their intentions mutually legible. That is more consequential than whispering secret revenge into Cortes's ear. The alliance that followed was not Tlaxcala surrendering its agency to Spain. Tlaxcalan rulers pursued their own war. They supplied warriors, food, intelligence, and a secure base. In return, they sought advantage over regional enemies and later demanded privileges from the Spanish crown based on their service. Their descendants would portray themselves not as conquered auxiliaries, but as conquistadors in their own right. The next major stop was Cholula, an important sacred and commercial center. There, Cortes, his Spaniards, and indigenous allies carried out a massacre in October 1519. Spanish accounts claimed they had uncovered a conspiracy. Other traditions challenged that justification and blamed Tlaxcalan hostility toward Cholula or Spanish calculation. The precise number killed is uncertain, but the violence was extensive and politically transformative. The original script skips Cholula because it complicates the clean image of Cortes liberating victims of Mexica terror. At Cholula, his coalition demonstrated terror of its own. Unarmed or poorly prepared people were trapped and killed. The event warned other cities that resistance, or merely suspected resistance, could bring collective punishment. Psychological warfare did not belong to one civilization. When the coalition finally descended into the basin of Mexico, it did not march straight toward an empire already collapsing from within. Tenochtitlan remained powerful. Its population is often estimated in the hundreds of thousands, although exact totals are debated. The island capital was connected by causeways and supplied through dense networks of canoe traffic, agriculture, markets, tribute, and alliance. Moctezuma did not see only ghosts. His government gathered intelligence, sent envoys, weighed diplomatic options, and attempted to control the encounter. His eventual decision to admit the coalition into Tenochtitlan was dangerous, but the alternatives were dangerous too. Attacking foreign guests accompanied by thousands of indigenous allies could trigger a larger regional war. Refusing entry might not remove them. Hospitality could provide surveillance and buy time. On November 8, 1519, Moctezuma and Cortes met. Neither man stood alone. Malintzin translated. Nobles, soldiers, allies, servants, and observers surrounded the exchange. Every phrase crossed languages and political worlds. The future did not turn on two emperors playing chess. It moved through a crowd. Within months, the Spaniards seized Moctezuma and held him inside his own capital. Cortes then left to confront Narvaez on the coast. While he was gone, Pedro de Alvarado's forces massacred participants at the Tlaxcala festival. Tenochtitlan erupted. The Spaniards and their allies fled the city during the deadly retreat, later called the Noche Triste. The ships had been destroyed, yet Cortes still retreated. That fact exposes the weakness of the original legend. Eliminating vessels did not create a straight road toward inevitable victory. The invasion nearly failed. Men drowned carrying stolen treasure. Horses and artillery were lost. Indigenous allies died in large numbers. Only refuge in Tlaxcala allowed the coalition to recover. What followed was not a replay of the first march. It was a larger indigenous war reshaped by European participation. More communities joined against Tenochtitlan. Texcocan factions became crucial. Smallpox devastated the region and killed the Mexica ruler Cuitlahuac. 13 brigantines, built with indigenous labor and transported in pieces, contested the lake. The final siege cut food and fresh water, while combat destroyed the city block by block. Spanish steel alone did not defeat stone, nor did one woman unlock a golden gate. Malintzin continued translating through this unstable world. Her position gave her visibility and influence, but it did not erase the coercion at the beginning of her story. We cannot confidently say she acted from a plan of revenge against her own people. Mesoamerica was not one nation, and she did not belong to the Mexica ruling community of Tenochtitlan. The people who enslaved and transferred her, the Maya-speaking communities among whom she lived, the Totonacs, Tlaxcalans, Cholulans, Texcocans, and Mexica, all had distinct political identities. Calling her the architect of her people's destruction compresses that diversity into a nation that did not yet exist, and places the moral weight of invasion on an enslaved indigenous woman instead of the armed men and institutions pursuing conquest. She was not merely a victim without choices. She was not a free strategist directing events from outside danger. She made consequential decisions inside conditions she did not create. That tension is what makes her historically powerful. Cortés was neither an invincible genius nor a gambler who won by luck alone. He was politically agile, ruthless, literate in Spanish legal culture, skilled at exploiting division, and willing to use exemplary violence. He also misunderstood situations, depended on others, suffered catastrophic reversals, and survived because indigenous states repeatedly supplied what his original company lacked. The ships matter because their destruction reveals his method. He took a weak position and altered the choices available to everyone around him. But the conquest did not begin when he removed retreat. It began when different groups concluded that this dangerous outsider might be useful, and failed to foresee the colonial order that would follow. So who truly opened the road to Tenochtitlan? Cortés with his legal coup, Malintzin with her command of language, the Totonacs who first allied with him, or Tlaxcalan leaders who transformed a foreign expedition into a regional army. Tell us which decision changed the campaign most. Subscribe to the History Ledger and continue with us into the next conquest built from a legend that never happened. Cortés did not burn his ships, but the ledger records how carefully he removed the way back.